Thank you. Thank you. So I should start by saying that I am a nerd, which is a shock to none of you, right? Because I think I meet the stereotype of being a nerd: skinny body, nasally voice, allergy to the sun, perfect trifecta. Right, I am a skinny guy. You don't have to remind me that I'm skinny. I did an event not too long ago, and a woman came up to me afterwards, and she's like, I just want to tell you, you look exactly like a skinny Hugh Jackman. I appreciated the compliment. I thought that was great, but I was like, I didn't like the way that she emphasized the word skinny. It's like, are you sure you don't mean a frail Conan O'Brien? Is that maybe more? Because I'm skinny. I've always been skinny. I was born 8.3 pounds and then stayed that way till I was 15 years old. But I am a nerd, and if you're wondering what type of nerd, computer, math, or Star Wars, the answer is yes. All of those. And I've always been obsessed with efficiency. Right? I feel like the word efficient should be one syllable. Right, shorten that up a little bit. And ever since I can remember, I've tried to do things as efficiently as possible, right? Really since before I can remember, because I was born 3 weeks early. So apparently, even in the womb, I was like, I don't need a full 9 months. I'm ready to go right now. Let's do this, Mom. I wasn't born like that. You guys would have heard about that if I came out like that, right? But no, I'm obsessed with efficiency, and I'm very much an engineer, right? As a kid, I used to like to take things apart and put them back together again, things like clocks and radios in my parents' marriage. Never got that one back together. Right, but I'm an engineer, and I've been obsessed with efficiency. I remember in the 5th grade, I got really excited when I discovered that if you put all of the like silverware together when loading a dishwasher, you save about 20 seconds on the unload. Right, got super excited about it. I wrote a 10-point plan to my family about how to efficiently load and unload a dishwasher, which they promptly ignored. Right. And then in school, I decided that smart for me was getting a 93% in all of my classes, because a 93% was the lowest grade you could get and still get an A. Right? It got to the point that if I got a 94, 95, or a 100%, I was upset because it meant that I did more work than I had to do. Right? Even now, I'm obsessed with efficiency. I find a shirt that I like this one, and then I buy it 10 times, right? Just so I have a very easy wardrobe of what to pick. Obsessed with efficiency. So I went to school. I got a degree in computer science and engineering from The Ohio State University and started working at Procter Gamble. And at P&G, I knew that I was going to like working at P&G because my first day I was talking with my manager, and he was going through a series of questions, and he was like, how good are you at PowerPoint? I was like, I excel at it. He was like, was that a Microsoft Office pun? I was like, word. But I knew I was going to like working there because he was like, you know what, I like your outlook. It's like, boom, I'll work here. I can do it, right? But what I learned at P&G is that there is a difference between efficiency and effectiveness, right? And this was a big aha for me, because you can be efficient with things like computers, right? You don't have to motivate a computer to work. You don't have to convince it to turn on. It doesn't need coffee before it's going to do anything. Right? A Java update maybe, right? But not actual coffee, right? You can be efficient. You can't be efficient with people, right? Because humans have emotions and feelings. And I'm told as an engineer, I don't have to put those things in quotes, right? But that changes how we do things. And when something goes wrong with the computer, an error message pops up. We can Google, we can figure it out, right? We as humans don't have error messages. And things would be so much easier if we did. Right? If you're stressed out, if you're going hard at things and stuff like that, you're starting to get a little bit burnt out, warning message just pops up. Warning, system overload. Please restart by taking a nap. Right? That would be helpful. Some error messages you wouldn't even have to change at all. Like say you're out flirting with a waiter, she's not really feeling it, just pops up, error, unable to establish connection to server. Things would be so much easier. But that's not how we as human beings work. And yet we still treat other humans as if they're computers, right? I'm a project manager by training. That's what I did at P&G. And we label people as resources, right? Just as computers are a resource, time is a resource, money is a resource, people are a resource. And we start to forget that the other person on the other side of an email, the other side of a conference call, or the other side of our marketing campaign that we're creating is a fellow human being, right, with human lives and human emotions. And those emotions matter because 83% of Americans are stressed out at work. 55% of Americans are unsatisfied with their jobs. And 47% of Americans struggle to stay happy. Of course, it's even worse in Disney World, where statistically only 1 out of 7 dwarfs is happy. But it leads to 70% of the workforce being disengaged, costing U.S. economies up to $500 billion in lost productivity every single year. Right? So what it's saying is that the current way of working isn't actually working. And when you consider the average person will work 90,000 hours in a lifetime and spend more time with their coworkers than with their families, start to realize that the current way of living isn't really living, right? Because of how we do things. We've transitioned from an industrial age, right, where efficiency really mattered, to a knowledge economy, where we have to be effective. And luckily, we have humor, because humor helps. People who use humor in the workplace are more productive, they are less stressed, and they are happier. This is me on the end right there. Adorable. Right? I am so happy. Even though I have a boo-boo on my head, I am so happy. Right? But not only that, humor helps in a number of ways. Humor helps to get people to listen, increases long-term memory retention, improves understanding, aids in learning, helps communicate messages, improves group cohesiveness, reduces status, these things, and on and on and on and on, right? These are some incredible benefits to the value of humor in the workplace, right? It helps to improve communication, build relationships, enhance problem solving, increase productivity, and strengthen leadership, right? All of those things are important for us, especially as marketers. The average person sends and receives 112 emails per day and spends up to 80% of their time in some form of active communication. So using humor as a way to get people to pay attention becomes very, very relevant, right? We want to build relationships with our coworkers and with our customers, right? Using humor as a way to connect with someone, where we connect over Game of Thrones, right? How we talk about it, what's going to happen, season finale coming up, what happened last week, what, crazy, right? We connect on a human level, and that helps us. And all of these things, by the way, are backed by case studies, research, and real-world examples. I didn't just make them up, right? But there might be a few of you that might be a little bit skeptical. Right? I work with a lot of organizations around the world about the value of humor, and I've never really met anyone that thinks of humor as a bad thing. Right? They typically don't think of it as a bad thing, but they think of it more as a nice to have. Right? But when you consider that 83% of Americans are stressed out at work, 55% are unsatisfied with their jobs, 47% struggle to stay happy, right? Humor isn't a nice to have, it's a must have. Right? We need to change the way that we do work. A few of you might also be a little bit skeptical, thinking in the sense of like, oh, I could never do that. I did an event in Switzerland not too long ago, and one of the other speakers was this gentleman here, Kevin Richardson, the lion whisperer. If you guys have ever seen like that video where there's a lion hugging a dude, that's Kevin Richardson. He basically helps to raise lions from cubs and just hangs out with them like he's one of them, right? And I was talking with him, and he found out that I did stand-up and improv comedy. He's like, I could never do that. It's like, you live with lions, right? And he was terrified of stand-up improv comedy, but it's all about thinking, it's all about how you think about it, because there's a couple of things you should understand about humor. The first is the definition of humor, right? It's important to know that, make sure that we're all on the same page. My grandmother has started texting me recently. My grandmother, she's 83 years old, grew up without a phone, now has an iPhone, right? Pretty impressive, but it's adorable. Her first message to me was, Dear Andrew, trying out texting, love your grandma. It's like, she thinks it's a letter. And this is great. So I sent her a message back. I was like, Grandma, you don't have to say all that stuff. And her response is, Dear Andrew, okay, love your grandma. My favorite part is that it's always love your grandma, right? Like if she wrote love grandma, I'd be confused. Like, Dear Andrew, have a good time in San Francisco, love grandma. grandma? Whose grandma? My grandma? Your grandma? A creepy dude named Grandma? Who is texting me right now? But I was in France not too long ago to lead a couple of humor workshops, and I got back, so I sent a message to my grandmother, like, hey, Grandma, I just got back from France. It was a lot of fun. And her response was, Dear Andrew, France, ? WTF. What? So I called my grandmother up, and I was like, Grandma, what do you think WTF means? And she was like, oh, well, someone at Bridge told me it means, well, that's fun. I was like, yep, that's exactly what it means, because I am not explaining that one to my grandmother, right? So we want to make sure that we're on the same page when we talk about humor, because a lot of times when we think about humor, we think of things that are funny, which is absolutely a component of humor. But humor is defined as a comic absurd or incongruous quality causing amusement, right? So this idea of humor, the idea of funny, is certainly covered with comic, but it's also something that's a little bit silly, something that's a little bit different that causes amusement. So you might not get laughter, but instead you might get a smile, and that's also very, very relevant. Here are a couple of examples kind of within the marketing world as well as a couple of other areas. This first one is from Tire Discounters. We'll go back one. Well, you've seen that one, yeah? Are you in the wrong job? That's a great job recruiting ad. I like that one. Tire Discounters. Yeah, shut up, no, you shut up. I think it's pretty good. Right, and then for my other project managers, this is how the customer explained it, right? How the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, how the consultant described it. Of course, it's a beautiful chair. Then we have how the programmer wrote it, how it was documented, which is not at all, how it was billed, of course, and then what they ultimately needed was just a tire swing. Right, so not all these aren't necessarily all laugh out loud hysterical, but they are something different, right? If you showed this in a presentation, this is going to be something where people are like, oh, this is a little bit different, let me pay attention. So when we talk about humor in the workplace, we're talking about a way of working that is different, effective, and fun. Humor in the workplace isn't necessarily about making work funny so much as it is about making work more fun, more enjoyable for us to go to. The second thing to understand about humor is that there's a difference between sense of humor and ability to humor. Right? Sense of humor versus ability to humor. They say that there are 5 senses, right? I say that there are at least 10. You have the normal 5, right? Sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell, if we can get through those, touch, smell, right? Then we also have some other ones. We have our sense of humor. We have our sense of direction, sense of time, common sense, which isn't so common, and then, of course, the ability to see dead people, which some of you are like, wait a second, shouldn't it be that be the 6th sense? And yes, it just works funnier in the joke if it's down at the end, right? But sense of humor is all about your ability to recognize something that is humorous, right, and when it would be appropriate. And what that means is that to use humor in the workplace, to use humor effectively, doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be the creator of the humor. Instead, you can be the shepherd of humor, right? The conduit of humor. You can share things out, right? You can send an email and at the bottom of it include a link to a funny video or an image that you found online. Or you can connect with comedians to write copy for you, right? To do the thing that they do well and make people laugh, to make things humorous. So that doesn't mean that you have to be the creator of it. But that being said, if you do want to create humor, there is an advantage because humor is, in fact, a skill. Here are a couple of examples of humor that you can share from The Onion. These are some of my favorite headlines. So Johnson & Johnson introduces nothing but tear shampoo. It's toughen up newborns. I like that. CIA realizes it's been using black highlighters all these years. Pretty good. And Ninja Parade slips through town unnoticed once again. Right, it's pretty good. Right, but so we can share this type of humor out. We just want to make sure that we give credit when we do it and that we don't violate any copyright rules as we're doing that. So next piece, though, is that humor is a skill, which means it can be learned. And I know this because I am someone that has had to learn how to use humor. I've done nearly 1,000 stand-up and improv shows now at this point all around the world, and I recently went to my high school reunion, and when people found out that I did stand-up and improv comedy, they said, but you're not funny. And they were right, because this is not the face of funny. All right, this is me from high school. I was never the class clown or the life of the party. And there's a lot that's funny about this picture, but none of it is intentional. Right, like I had the blonde tips, kind of like an NSYNC look, which I feel pretty good because I feel almost like I'm in NSYNC now with this microphone on. It feels pretty good. Right, the clothes that are way too big for me. The theme of this was into a dream. I am no one's dream in this picture, right? I was not that type of person. In fact, if you know Myers-Briggs, I am INTJ, right? I am very much an introvert. If you know Star Wars, I'm R2-D2. It's a translation, I think. But what I've learned is that things like personality assessments are only a single assessment at a single point of time, right? Our personality assessment doesn't define who we are. We are defined by our actions and our behavior. Therefore, if we act like a humorist, if we share humorous things, if we create humor, we are in fact a humorist, whether or not we think we could do that. Right? It doesn't matter if we think we could, we actually just started to do it. And that's the value of starting to understand humor. And humor is like any skill, right? I first started learning it in college when me and some friends started an improv comedy group. My best friend wanted to start a group. He needed people and forced me to join. That's how I went from computer science engineer to like, what's going on, right? And as you can tell from this picture, we were not very good. And at least to start out. But with practice and repetition, we started to understand what we were doing. We started to get better at it. And that's true of any skill, right? It's true for any skill that you're going to learn. So I want to do a super quick exercise. Everyone stand up. Great. And I'm going to mirror this for you. So on your left hand, point forward. On your right hand, give a thumbs up. Great. Now just switch the two. And switch back and forth, back and forth. You don't have a gun. The Bill Clinton, I'm giving a speech fist. All right, it's just a thumb up, finger out. You're just switching back and forth. It's a little bit of a challenge. Sometimes doing one hand at a time helps. Or doing like the Nordic track approach helps a little bit for whatever reason. Helps a little bit. All right, excellent. So you can go ahead and have a seat. You can work on that if you want. But this... I love this exercise because, one, it's a great demonstration, or it's a great warm-up because it's warming up the left and right side of our body, so warming up the left and right side of our brain. But it's also a great demonstration of something called the 4 stages of competence, or the conscious competence learning model, which says whenever we learn a new skill, we go through 4 phases. The first phase is non-conscious incompetence, right? We are unaware that we can't do something. And so if I came up to you on the street and was like, hey, do you think you could do this? First of all, you'd be like, why is a stranger approaching me like that? But second of all, you'd be like, I think so. It seems pretty easy. I don't seem to have any difficulty with it. So you're non-consciously incompetent. You try it, get to the point that you're consciously incompetent, right? You realize that you can't really do it. Then through practice and repetition, you take a workshop, right? You spend an entire weekend or something. Actually, if you do this for about 5 minutes, you'll get it, right? But you get to the point that you are consciously competent. When you really think about it, you're able to do it. And then so that's consciously competent. Then through more practice and repetition, you get to non-consciously competent, where you don't even have to think about what it is that you're doing. You're able to do it, right? That's true for any new skill that you learn. It's true when you're first learning to walk. It's true when you're learning a language. It's true when you're learning a skill like humor, right? It takes practice and repetition, and it gets to the point that at first it might seem a little bit overwhelming. Oh, I can't do this. Becomes second nature a little bit later, right? So that's true for any skill. So then how do you actually go about and get started using humor in the workplace? The reality is that you just have to actually start, right? There's no one except for, I'm the closest person that's ever going to come to you and say, start using humor, right? People aren't going to typically like write in on comments of like, be funny, or your CEO is not going to pull you aside and say, hey, great work, but tell more jokes, right? It's just not going to happen. So the reality is that you just have to start. As an engineer, of course, I have a process for it. To me, I think about every situation as I assess the situation. I decide then how can I use humor in that situation, and then I execute it, right? And then you repeat that over and over and over and over and over and over and over, right? Because as Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. Same thing is true for humor. That's what Aristotle said. So here's a quick recap. So we'll go back to this recap. Humor isn't necessarily about making things funny. It's about making work fun. We do it to be more productive, less stressed, and happier. Sense of humor is knowing what is humorous and when it's appropriate versus a skill of humor, which is actually about creating humor. And then we do it through 3 steps of assessing, deciding, and executing. Now, I have just a couple of minutes. I want to take a couple of questions and then end on one last thing. So does anyone have any questions? My rule is that we have to get to at least one. And it could be about anything. It could be about favorite milkshake. Yeah.
Wait for the catch box.
Oh, yeah. So you get to,
all right, ready?
You get to throw it, catch it.
All right.
Oh,
Okay.
that's great.
Would I talk into this?
Yeah, you talking?
I arrived late. Thank you. Have you had circumstances where people in the workplace were really resistant to humor, and maybe even somebody had tried and had encountered negative reaction? And what do you do? What do you do if your boss or other people in the workplace aren't receptive to this idea?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So the question is around, what do we do if people aren't receptive to humor? I think one part of it is sharing the value of humor, sharing some of the statistics. I work with a lot of engineers, and a lot of them are like, why would I care about this? And then you start to understand, like, oh, you actually get paid more if you use humor, right? They've done studies where people who use humor are paid more, or these other benefits, right? Because humor is effective with the one thing that we as engineers are not very good with, and that's other human beings. Right? So humor is actually helpful. I think the other thing is what I train on is something that's called the humor map. Because as an engineer, I don't want to just use humor for the sake of humor. I want to use it for a very specific purpose. So I define my map as your medium, or how you're going to execute that humor. Is it an email, or is it in a presentation, something like that? Who is your audience? What do they know? What do they expect? What do they need? And then finally, what is your purpose? And the purpose is the most important one, because if you want to use humor to get people's attention, that's going to be very different than the humor you might use to build a relationship. And if you start with that purpose, people start to see, oh, I understand why they used humor was for this reason. There's a lot of intricacies kind of within that, but I think starting with those things, starting with a very clear purpose of why you're using humor, and also sharing the value of humor helps. Send them a video, something like that. I have an article on my website that's basically those 30 benefits of humor, and it shares all the resources or the sources behind that as well. So you can take a look at that and be like, look, no, this is backed by research. There are companies that do this. You can find companies that are similar to your area and be like, look, they use it as well. This is why it's important. This is why it matters. Hopefully that helps. Right? All right, so just for the sake of time, I'm going to jump into something. I will be around for the rest of the afternoon, so certainly if you have questions, feel free to stop me and let's chat. But I want to finish on this thing real quick. As I said, the thing that you need to start, or the way to start using humor is actually just to start. I'm a project manager, so we have to end on next steps, right? I call them action items, though, because I think it sounds cooler, right? And our action item, we said, is to start, right? But based on all the work that I've done, I know that there are 3 main reasons why you won't. All right, 3 main reasons why you won't start with using humor. First one is you'll say that I don't think my boss or coworkers would approve, right? We have the same exact situation. But the reality is that 81% of employees say a fun workplace would make them more productive, and 98% of CEOs say they prefer job candidates with a sense of humor, right? So it's actually welcome. People just don't know necessarily that they can or how to do it. The other reality, though, is if you think that you work for the 2% of people that don't allow humor in the workplace, they can't change the way that you think, right? You might not be able to do it for other people, but you can always do it for yourself. You can apply gamification for the things that you can do. Or sometimes when I'm going through email and starting to get bored, I'll start to read emails in a different accent, right? Every time I get an email from David, I'm reading it in an Irish accent, right? Because it's something a little bit fun and something a little bit different for me to do. The second reason why you won't use humor is you'll say that you don't know how, which I understand because at first it can seem intimidating, but hopefully this helps you to start to understand how to use humor. But there are also plenty of resources. You're going to see some today from other people of how to start to use humor in the workplace. There are plenty of resources as well. If you have questions on it, certainly feel free to reach out to me. I have a book on the thing, an online course, all that kind of stuff. More than happy to help you out with those things or answer normal questions. So this is how you can get a hold of me. My Twitter is @humorthatworks. My website is humorthatworks.com. My email is andrew@humorthatworks.com. So if you want to use any of those ways, certainly feel free to reach out to me. The final reason that you won't use humor is to say that you don't have time. Right, which I understand, right? We're always constantly busy. We're constantly doing different things. But here's the reality. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do, how big your bank account is, or how many Twitter followers you have, right, you get 168 hours in a week. Everyone's the same, 168 hours in a week. If you average about 7 hours of sleep per night, that's 49 hours each week spent sleeping. That leaves 119 hours awake. If you work a minimum of 40 hours a week, right? Because no one ever works more than 40 hours a week here in the US, of course not, right? But if you work 40 hours a week, that is 33.6% of your adult awake life spent at work, right? We already said the average person works 90,000 hours. You don't have time to make it more productive, less stressed, and happier. You don't have time to actually do your job better and enjoy it more. You don't have time for humor in the workplace. The reality is that you have to make that choice to start to use humor. You guys have been fantastic. I've been Andrew Tarvin. Thank you very much.